Turning to the conflict in the Middle East now, where the Israeli military says it's killed a key Hezbollah commander during its bombardment of Lebanon that's killed 569 people. We spoke to our Middle East correspondent, Alison Horn, in Jerusalem earlier.
For the second day in a row now, Israel has continued its aerial bombardment campaign across Lebanon in what some witnesses we've spoken to have said has felt like an unending wave of destruction. One of those airstrikes was on a building in Lebanon's capital, Beirut, where Israel says it killed a senior Hezbollah commander. But more than 550 others have also been killed across the few days of this aerial campaign. Lebanon's Ministry of Health says the majority of those killed are civilians, including a large number of women and children. Israel says it believes that many of the people that have been killed are Hezbollah members, but this is now the deadliest period of hostility between Hezbollah and Israel in several decades. Tens of thousands of Lebanese civilians are now displaced from their homes after fleeing from danger zones. They are now taking shelter in makeshift evacuation centres like schools and mosques and churches. Some people we've spoken to said they are prepared to be there for several months. They believe that this situation will escalate. Hezbollah, in retaliation to these Israeli airstrikes, has sent continuous barrages of rockets deep into Israeli territory. Most of them have been intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome, so very little damage caused in Israel. No one has been killed in this part of the world here, but Israel has also said that it is ready to engage with more strikes. It's got more strikes ready for targeting Hezbollah weaponry. It has said that it does want this to be a short-lived aerial campaign, but it is foreshadowing that it will stay there for as long as it feels it needs to, and it isn't ruling out the possibility of a ground invasion.
Alison Horn there, and conflict in the Middle East is at the top of the agenda at a meeting of world leaders at the United Nations. Our North America correspondent Carrington Clark is in New York. Carrington, what are they saying?
Yeah, Lebanon is about 10,000 kilometres from New York, but it's front of mind for world leaders who have come here to high-level week at the United Nations. This is where the world leaders come together, give addresses about the things that are most pertinent to the people they represent. And we have heard from multiple world leaders today how concerned they are about the escalating tensions in Lebanon and the death toll that is continuing to mount. A huge amount of focus was on the address from US President Joe Biden. This is his fourth address to the United Nations. This is his swan song, and he walked in today to the centre of global diplomacy and implored people to please walk back from the brink of conflict in Lebanon.
Too many on each side of the Israeli-Lebanon border remain displaced. A full-scale war is not in anyone's interest. Even if the situation has escalated, a diplomatic solution is still possible. In fact, it remains the only path to lasting security to allow the residents from both countries to return to their homes and the border safely. And that's what we're working tirelessly to achieve.
Now, what we also saw today was castigation of Israel by the Turkish President Erdogan, who suggested that there needed to be an alliance of humanity to pull Israel back from the continued bombardment of both Gaza and of Lebanon. We are waiting to see whether or not Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will come here to New York. At the moment, he is scheduled to speak on Thursday, but given how fluid the situation is, it's unclear whether or not that will occur. We also saw today the Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky in attendance when Joe Biden gave that address to the United Nations Assembly. but he also spoke to the United Nations Security Council. He is concerned that focus has shifted away from the conflict in Ukraine, with so much, obviously, attention on the unfolding misery in the Middle East. And he's imploring the world to not forget Ukraine and is asking for more support in the forms of both financial aid and weapons as they continue to fight against Russia. The test for the United Nations is whether or not there are practical solutions to come out of these meetings. And yes, a huge amount of the attention is on these addresses to the General Assembly, but it's really these side meetings that can sometimes have the most impact. Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong is also in attendance, and she has held today a meeting with her Chinese counterpart, and there will also be a series of meetings as we work through this week.
Carrington, thanks very much. New figures show Medicare rebates for trips to the specialist have dropped to an all-time low of 52% of costs. That's compared to 72% of fees covered for visits 2 decades ago. The Health Minister, Mark Butler, says the federal government has delivered the largest investment in Medicare in decades, but doctors say rebates are falling further and further behind.
So that we see now where they're almost meaningless when it comes to accessing care in the federally funded Medicare sphere.
Police have charged a 15-year-old boy over a stabbing at a shopping centre in Melbourne's west that left another teenage boy dead. Police say a fight broke out between the two boys before the teenager allegedly pulled a knife and stabbed the 16-year-old several times. A bystander attempted CPR on the victim until emergency services arrived, but the boy died at the scene.
Environmental groups say the federal government is undermining Australia reaching net zero emissions by 2050 by approving extensions to 3 coal mines in New South Wales. It's understood the extensions will secure about 1,800 jobs, and they've been welcomed by the Minerals Council of Australia.
Almost 1/3 of Tasmanian medical emergencies weren't assigned an ambulance within recommended timeframes last financial year. Most critical cases are supposed to be assigned an ambulance within 3 minutes of receiving a 000 call, but 29% of calls did not meet this target in the last financial year, and that is up from 26% the year before.
Overseas visitors are, for the first time, spending more than pre-pandemic levels in New South Wales. Destination New South Wales says its number of overseas visitors is growing faster than any other state or territory. The estimated value of the New South Wales tourism sector is now at a recorded high of almost $53 billion.
And Uluru has experienced its wettest September day on record as unseasonal rain continues to fall in Central Australia. Around 32 millimetres fell at Uluru on Monday. That beat the 2010 record of 24 millimetres. It's all due to an unusual spring cloud band bringing widespread falls to the Northern Territory, the heavy rain creating cascading waterfalls down the rock.